"Look, she has drugs in her bag," the flight attendant shouted, holding up a small vacuum-sealed package like it was a trophy. Her voice cut to the quiet luxury of first class, drawing every eye in the cabin. She wasn't whispering. She wanted to be heard. And she made sure to point, loud and clear, at the only black woman on the plane. "This passenger brought illegal substances onto this aircraft," she declared. Gasps rippled through the cabin as camera phones went up like lighters at a concert. A businessman in two raised his eyebrows. A couple across the aisle leaned in closer. The flight attendant's tone wasn't concerned. It was triumphant, almost gleeful. You could feel it in the air. The satisfaction of someone who believed they had caught a criminal in the act. The woman in question, Dr. Camille Hart, 42, a poised professional dressed in a slate-gray cashmere coat, didn't flinch. She looked down at the package, then back up at the attendant, her face unreadable. She had boarded quietly just an hour earlier in Chicago, taken her seat in 3B, and hadn't spoken to anyone since. Now, she was the center of a storm. When two TSA officers arrived and began to escort her down the aisle, the whispers were deafening. "Did you see what she had? Unreal. They're getting bold, even in first class." But as Dr. Hart passed the flight attendant, she leaned in close, her voice low and sharp like a blade in silk. "You have no idea what you've just done." It was the kind of sentence that sticks to the walls, the kind that makes your gut twist before your brain catches up, because the flight attendant had no way of knowing. She had just framed a senior field agent from the Department of Homeland Security. Dr. Camille Hart wasn't just any passenger. At 42, she had seen things most people only read about in the news or in some classified government brief. She wasn't a doctor in the traditional sense of the word. No. Camille had spent the last decade working for the Department of Homeland Security, an agency known for keeping the nation's most sensitive operations out of the public eye. A rising star, she'd earned her spot as the head of aviation security, a position so secretive that only a handful of people outside her division even knew it existed. And today, she wasn't on a flight to visit family or take a vacation. She was here on a mission, and it wasn't about stolen luggage or delayed flights. Hours earlier, in Washington, Camille had been briefed by Director Reynolds, a man who trusted her with some of the highest-stakes jobs in the department. Her mission was clear. Gather intel on a suspected drug smuggling ring operating within commercial airlines, one that moved high-value drugs under the radar using flight crews. It was a routine assignment, but Camille's involvement in the investigation was far from ordinary. She was the best, sharp-eyed, instinctual, and relentless. Her ability to read a room was uncanny. The second she stepped into the airport terminal in Boston that morning, she could already sense the signs of a larger story unfolding. The child who had dropped her stuffed bear, the way the TSA agent's badge had looked out of place, the casual conversations between airline staff that should have been professional. Every detail was logged into her encrypted phone, notes that would later crack open an operation much larger than anyone knew. But today, her focus wasn't on all that. It was on the crew member, Megan Parker, a name flagged in her briefing, a woman with secrets hidden just beneath her perfectly manicured surface. Megan Parker wasn't the kind of woman you'd expect to see struggling. At 32, she had the polished, professional look that screamed success. Her blonde hair was always perfectly styled, her teeth blindingly white, and her wardrobe was filled with designer pieces that could rival anyone on the cover of a magazine. She had mastered the art of looking put together, even if everything behind the curtain was starting to crumble. Her job as a flight attendant for Atlantic Airways had been a means to an end that she had yet to reach. Once, she had believed the glistening future of promotion and recognition would come to her as easily as a fresh cocktail tray. After all, she had the look, the charm, and the air of confidence that said, "I belong here." But it didn't take long for her to realize that the airline industry wasn't as glamorous as it seemed. There were the long hours, the endless flights, the constant competition, and worst of all, the rising tension between her and her colleagues. Megan had worked hard to climb the ranks, but when Alyssa Johnson, a younger black flight attendant, received the promotion Megan had long coveted, something inside her snapped. It wasn't just that Alyssa had secured the job, Megan couldn't stand that someone of a different race had beat her. The whispers from colleagues about diversity hires only added fuel to fire. Megan wasn't stupid. She knew she needed money. Badly. Her credit card bills were mounting, and the lavish lifestyle she had cultivated was beginning to feel more like a house of cards. So, when a first-class passenger, a charming man who made promises of easy cash, offered her a deal, Megan saw no way out. The offer was simple. Move packages through security unnoticed in exchange for a payout that would clear most of her debt. But Megan was about to learn a lesson she would never forget. Greed always catches up with you, no matter how perfect your smile is. Megan had always known how to put on a show. She was a master of fake smiles, practiced politeness, and charm that could make even the grumpiest CEO feel like they were in the presence of royalty. But beneath her flawless exterior, a storm had been brewing for months. It wasn't just the career envy or the crushing debts. No, it was something deeper, the resentment that festered inside her whenever she saw someone who wasn't like her rise above her. It wasn't her fault, she'd tell herself. The world was changing too fast. People like Alyssa, with their diversity quotas and affirmative action, had it easier. Megan had worked harder than anyone to get to where she was. But it always seemed like someone was being handed something that she had to fight for. And that bitterness started to morph into something more dangerous, a need for control. And control, for Megan, meant money. Lots of it. She had met the man in first class months ago, a well-dressed figure who spoke in smooth tones and knew exactly what to say to a woman like her. He was a regular on Atlantic Airways flights, always slipping her cash in subtle offers for favors. At first, it had been small stuff, delivering a forgotten bag to a passenger, sneaking some extra snacks to the VIPs. But then, the offers grew bigger. The rewards grew bigger. The deal that day had been simple. Move a small package past security. Nobody would ever know. And it would pay off enough to keep her creditors at bay, at least for a while. But there was a price to pay for everything, and Megan didn't realize it yet. She didn't know that the careful web she was weaving would soon unravel in front of an audience she couldn't control. The flight from Boston to Miami had been uneventful until now. Megan Parker was busy preparing the first-class cabin for landing, gliding between passengers with the practiced grace of someone who knew how to make a 5-star impression. She flashed her signature smile, handed out pre-arrival drinks, and made small talk with the kind of effortless charm that only the truly practiced can muster. But there was a tension building in her chest, a gnawing feeling that today might not go as smoothly as the rest. Her crew bag weighed heavy on her shoulder, the small vacuum-sealed package inside almost pulsing with a sense of danger. It was hidden beneath a pile of cosmetics in her bag, a discreet little delivery of high-grade pharmaceuticals ready to make its way into the hands of someone who'd pay a small fortune for it. Megan had done this so many times, but today felt different. She couldn't quite put her finger on it, but the unease lingered like an uninvited guest. As the plane cruised at 30,000 feet, Megan noticed something strange. A passenger who hadn't been part of her usual routine. Dr. Camille Hart, seated in 3B, calm, composed, and watching her. Her gaze didn't flinch when Megan passed by, but Megan could feel the weight of it, like a quiet scrutiny. She dismissed it at first. No reason for it to be anything more than coincidence. But then the bell above 3B lit up, a signal for service. Megan hesitated. The call button had been lit for a while. She walked past it 3 times, but Dr. Hart hadn't pressed it again. The passenger in 2A, however, got immediate attention. So, with a forced smile, Megan approached. And that's when it happened. The subtle but unmistakable sign that something was off. Crystal Hart was paying far too much attention. Megan wasn't the only one keeping an eye on things. Dr. Camille Hart, in her unassuming first-class seat, was quietly observing everything around her, but she wasn't just watching passengers and crew. She was noticing patterns, small shifts in behavior, subtle actions that others would have missed. Her attention was fixed on Megan, and that nagging feeling in her gut had only grown stronger. Camille had been on enough covert assignments to know when something wasn't right. Megan's interactions had started to feel a little too calculated, an almost unnoticeable hesitation in her smile, the quick glances over her shoulder, the way she kept checking her crew bag a bit too often. There was something off about her, something Camille couldn't quite place but knew would need to be documented. What Camille had on her side was her training. Years of working in high-risk situations had honed her senses to the point where she could read a room better than anyone. And right now, the flight attendant's movements weren't just strange, they were suspicious. Camille's fingers subtly adjusted her tie pin, which also happened to be a cleverly disguised camera. Her job as a head of aviation security wasn't just about watching passengers. She was trained to document everything, especially the things most people would dismiss as insignificant. From her vantage point, she could see the exact moment when Megan discreetly moved into the galley, clutching her crew bag a little too tightly. That was when Camille knew this wasn't just bad service. This was bigger. She shifted in her seat, pretending to type on her tablet, but all the while, the camera in her tie pin was recording Megan's every move. The evidence was mounting. The show was about to begin. Camille could feel the tension in the air before it even hit her. As she leaned back in her seat, she watched Megan move through the cabin with a sense of purpose that wasn't just about serving drinks. Her actions were quick, calculated. And then it happened. Megan passed by her seat once more, this time avoiding eye contact entirely, except for the briefest flicker of something that resembled guilt. Camille didn't flinch. She didn't need to. The call button above Camille's seat lit up again. This time, Camille wasn't going to wait any longer. She knew exactly what was going on. The minutes dragged by like hours, and Megan finally made her way toward Camille's seat. Her eyes flicked to the button, and then quickly back to Camille, as if pretending to be busy. But Camille had seen enough. Megan. Camille's voice cut to the tension like a sharp blade, calm and composed. I think you've forgotten something. Megan looked up, startled, like she hadn't expected the confrontation. Her usual practiced smile wavered slightly. I'm sorry, ma'am. What do you need? She asked, but her voice was too sweet, too rehearsed. Camille's gaze didn't falter. This is not about a drink, Camille said, her eyes never leaving Megan's face. This is about something much bigger. A little mistake you made. A little package you've been hiding. Megan's face went pale. Her hands tightened around the tray she was holding, knuckles white. I don't know what you're talking about, she stammered, but Camille wasn't buying it. Oh, I think you do, Camille replied, her tone icy. A quick, subtle glance to the seat next to her confirmed it. Megan had already made the call. A plane marshal was walking down the aisle toward them, eyes sharp, ready for action. Megan's fake smile dropped completely. It was about to get ugly. The flight marshal's presence wasn't lost on Megan. As soon as he stepped into the aisle, she felt the ground beneath her feet shift, like the solid world she had carefully built was suddenly slipping away, piece by piece. Her heart was pounding, but she forced her hands to stay steady as she set the tray down on the nearest seat. She glanced at Camille, who was watching her with that unervingly calm gaze. For a moment, Megan tried to maintain her composure. This is just a misunderstanding, she stammered, turning toward the marshal. I think there's been some confusion. Her words were shaky, her usual smoothness nowhere to be found. The marshal didn't respond. His eyes were cold, professional, and every inch of him screamed that this wasn't a routine incident. He was already moving toward the back of the plane, signaling the air staff to clear the area. Megan's mind raced, trying to process the chaos that was about to unfold. How had this all gone wrong? She had planted the package, sure, but the rest of it, the accusations, the attention, none of it was supposed to happen. This wasn't part of the plan. Ma'am, if you would please come with me, the marshal said firmly, cutting through her panic like a knife through butter. Megan's thoughts flashed back to the moment when she decided to take the deal. The money, the debt relief, the sense of power. But now it was all crumbling. She glanced at the passengers who had been watching the whole ordeal unfold. Some were whispering, some were filming. The humiliation was impossible to ignore. It was like a nightmare, but there was no waking up. Then Camille spoke, her voice low but deadly. You've been framed, Megan, and now you'll pay the price. Megan swallowed hard. She could feel the walls closing in, and there was no way out. By the time Megan was escorted into the small interrogation room at the airport, the reality of her situation had started to sink in. The cold metal chair, the flashing lights and the security cameras, and the hushed whispers of agents and officials outside the door were like a slow drumbeat marking the end of her illusion. She had thought she was in control. But now, as she sat there handcuffed, her mind was flooded with the same thought over and over. How did I get here? In the last few hours, everything she had worked for, the polished image, the carefully constructed life, had come crashing down. The video, the evidence, Camille's calm demeanor, it all pointed to one thing. She had crossed a line, and there was no going back. Megan had always been good at pretending. She learned early on that the right smile could open doors, that playing by the rules of social status could get her far. But what she had never understood was that pretending could only take you so far. The real power didn't come from manipulation or deceit. It came from integrity. As she sat there, stewing in her guilt and shame, it hit her. All of her resentment, all of her bitterness, had led her to this moment. She had let her jealousy of others' success cloud her judgment. She had allowed a sense of entitlement to push her into illegal actions, all in the name of instant gratification. Megan had been used. She had thought herself clever, that she could escape the consequences. But there was no escape. The truth had a way of finding its way to the surface. And it didn't matter how many people you deceived or how long you wore your mask. Truth and justice would always win. Megan's fall from grace was swift, but it didn't end with her arrest. By the time the airline CEO, Richard Hamilton, had received the news, the story had already spread far beyond confined walls of the airport. The viral video of the drug incident had been shared across social media, accumulating millions of views. As the story spread, so did the public's outrage. The injustice of it all, how a black woman, Dr. Camille Hart, had been falsely accused and humiliated, sparked conversations about racism, abuse of power, and the broken systems that allowed such acts to take place. Meanwhile, Camille had taken charge of the situation. Despite the emotional toll the incident had caused, she remained calm, her training in covert operations allowing her to handle the media storm with dignity. She could have let the situation blow over, but she knew that this wasn't just about clearing her name. This was about exposing a larger issue, a toxic culture within the airline and possibly within other institutions. As she stood in front of the press, Camille's voice was steady, and her message was clear. "This isn't just about me," she said, her words carrying the weight of truth. "This is about creating a world where people are treated with fairness and respect, regardless of their race, regardless of their background. Justice is not just about punishing those who wronged you. It's about making sure that everyone is given a fair chance." Her words resonated with the public, and soon the airline executives, including CEO Richard Hamilton, were forced to address the issue head-on. They promised sweeping changes to improve internal systems, focusing on diversity, equality, and accountability. The lesson was clear. Justice didn't come from the noise of public opinion. It came from those who were brave enough to stand up, tell the truth, and use their power to make a difference. Camille had not just exposed a criminal. She had ignited a conversation that would hopefully change the way things were done for good.